Hi there. So, welcome, emerging leaders. So, you've been put in charge, and now what? So, let's say you've just been promoted, right? Or maybe you've suddenly found yourself managing a team, but no one actually has taught you how to lead. Now, you're probably really great at your job, and that's exactly why you were probably put in charge. But now you've realized that maybe leadership isn't just about doing more or adding more, right, to your to-do list. It's actually about becoming more. And if you've ever felt like you were handed the responsibility without a roadmap, as most of us have dived into people leadership and people management in that manner, this one is definitely for you. So in this video, we're going to unpack three critical things that every new or emerging leader should be focusing on. Basically, how to understand yourself before trying to lead others, how to communicate clearly so that you can build trust fast, and how to lead with confidence, even when you don't have all the answers. Because here's the truth: leadership isn't about control or a title. It's really about awareness. It's about connection. It's about having courage as well. So, I'm Monica Delaney-Teran, and for nearly 2 decades, I've worked inside leadership at every level, from small businesses to mid-sized firms to even Fortune 500 corporations. I've led teams and programs across government contracting and consulting and organizational strategy, working with people from every background, every walk of life, every education level, and every part of the professional ladder. And over the years, I've seen one thing that's been consistent and kind of truth. Most leaders aren't failing because they're bad at their jobs. If anything, they're excellent, they're tactical, they're really great, and they know what they're doing. They're struggling because no one has ever showed them how to lead people, how to lead projects, how to show that empowerment, right? Or support those in their organization with empowerment. And some of us haven't really had excellent leaders to be able to model from. Maybe most of us have had pretty crappy or shitty leaders. So today I want to give you a good foundation, right? That I wish that someone potentially could have given to me at some point early on in my leadership days of people managing as a junior manager. And the mindset and the focus areas that turn uncertainty into confidence, and of course, responsibility into real impact, because that's really what I know most leaders want to do, is demonstrate that they're making an impact in their role, in their organizations, and of course, showing that impact within, the people that they're helping to lead. All right, let's jump into kind of the myth of leadership, right? Let's start about talking about the biggest myths that most new leaders actually fall for. And not every leadership is about authority, right? It's not really about that. Maybe old school wise, I grew up in, when I say I grew up in government contracting, I really did. I was in my early 20s, and I saw a lot of authoritative approach in leadership, but that's not really it, right? Things have changed tremendously since over 20 years ago. We've evolved into understanding really what humanistic aspects need to be shown up in leadership. So it really isn't about being the boss. It isn't about managing people, definitely not. It's not about knowing everything or having all the answers, which even I've seen some really great potential leaders reject promotions or not wanting to be in a leadership role because they think that they have to know everything about everything, right? Which, no, that's impossible. You do that through years of experience, and even those that are going into retirement don't even know it all. And those are very seasoned individuals. So True leadership really is about influence, and influence starts with trust. You can't demand it. You have to earn it, and it comes with time. A lot of new managers think now that I'm in charge, people will listen, right? Now I have the title, and people will automatically fall in line and understand what it is that I need. But here's the truth. Your title might get the people's attention, right? But it's really your actions that's going to earn their respect. Leadership doesn't live in the job description, right? It shows up in how we're going to be communicating, especially under pressure, how you handle mistakes under pressure, and how you make people feel when they work with you. Because that's really what people leave with. It's that feeling, it's how you make them feel in the day to day, in the tough times, in the great times. That's what's going to help make that impact in a relationship perspective, right? Most people are promoted because they were really good at something. And that's most cases, right? Maybe you were great technically, strategically, operationally, but managing people, and again, not necessarily managing people, but managing the tasks and the responsibilities as a leader is a whole different skill set, one that no one really teaches us. You go from being like this doer to now having to be the developer, the organizer, the communicator, the the shield, if that's how you want to see it as well. From measuring your own output to actually owning the success of your team and of each of an individual in your team, not just as a whole or as a project base, but each individual as well and their well-being in the workplace. That's a very massive shift. It's a massive mental shift. It's an emotional shift. It's a relationship, or relationally shift. So if you're struggling, that doesn't mean that you're not cut out for leadership. It just means that you're human and you're learning this new language in your role. Now, the hardest part of leadership isn't the workload, right? It's the weight that now you're carrying, the level of responsibility that we carry of decision making, meeting the expectations of your leaders, of your organization's mission and goals, and also the weight that you carry of everyone's kind of emotions in the workplace, psychological safety in the workplace. You're consistently needing to balance that. So, what's right for the organization? What's right for your people from a cultural standpoint as well? And bottom line, what's right for you? Because you got to take care of yourself too. When you're new, it can feel like you're failing someone, no matter what choice you might make, because sometimes the confidence isn't there. But here's what I want you to remember, that you were chosen for this role for a reason. Someone saw potential in you, and your job now is to grow into that potential with awareness, not perfection. Leadership isn't about having it all figured out. Like we said, we don't need to know it all. It's about being willing to learn out loud, to say something like, I don't know yet, but let me find out. To listen more than to talk, and to care about people behind the work, the humanistic side, not just the work and the project itself. But leadership is a people business. You know, you're in the people business regardless of what project or organization or industry you're in. When you're a leader, you're in the people business. It's not about just the project, it's about the people. So that's where kind of leadership begins, not in your title and but definitely in your presence. So I want to dive into the three focus areas, right? There is this tactical side, absolutely. And I want to ground you with these three areas to start your journey because they're bite-sized pieces. And when it comes to leadership, you're probably even looking at this video and you're like desperately looking for ways to help yourself because you might potentially be feeling like you're drowning in your role, or you're terrified because you're about to start this new role, or you've just inherited this team. So these three focus areas hopefully help you and provide you with some grounded perspective and a foundation to grow from. So, the first, of course, we talked about self awareness because you can't lead others until you really understand you, your own patterns, your own triggers, and of course, your own values. The second is communication because clarity builds confidence and curiosity can build trust, will build trust eventually. The third is accountability because structure is consistent and consistency can turn into good intentions, into real results. And so that's the third component here. Those three become the starting point, and like I said, your foundation. They'll help you lead with confidence and without pretending to know it all. And it's going to help you stay grounded even when everything around you feels uncertain. So you don't have to be perfect again to lead, right? We talked about that. You just have to be present. And from here forward, that's what you're going to do to build together. Your leadership presence, your voice, your confidence will help lead consciously, even when you're learning on the go, which most of us are in this type of environment. So let's start with self-awareness. Again, the inner work of leadership. Okay, remember that. Here's the truth about most leaders that they miss, and I've studied a lot of leaders. I myself was in a position where I wasn't the best leader, right? And you can't really lead without self-awareness. And I know you've all probably heard about emotional intelligence because that's really important. And when we're building emotional intelligence, especially if it's not innate to us, if it's not something natural to us, then we start with self-awareness as how you can build your emotional intelligence out in the world. You start with you. So it's not just knowing who you are, because I know some folks, when they hear like getting to know yourself or having self-awareness, it's like, well, I know who I am. But it's really about understanding actually how you show up and learning under stress and conflict or pressure, how you show up in those instances, right? When you're under that tough deadline, when you're in the middle of a conflict with an employee or a counterpart, when you're under pressure because you have to meet whatever goals and objectives that are expected of you and your team. So it doesn't necessarily, leadership doesn't necessarily reveal what we want to be. It actually exposes who we actually are. And if you haven't yet had an experience of that, I promise that there will be some. And so hopefully this will arm you with the knowledge and also a practice so that you can get there before these hiccups happen. So when you're under deadlines, when someone on your team disappoints you, when a project goes sideways, that's when your habits or bad habits, your triggers and your emotional patterns will surface. If you haven't seen it, most don't see it when they're an individual contributor, they will peek through during an experience when you're in a leadership role. The more awareness you have of your internal world, your thoughts, your emotions, being able to identify those emotions, your default reactions, and of course, the more intentional you can be about your internal world will help you dissect the external world. So take some of these questions here as that we're about to go through. as a moment for reflection. So if you have a notebook with you, pull it out. Maybe even put pause on the video here while you answer some of these questions for yourself. And this is all about self-reflection, right? So ask yourself, first question, what kind of energy do people feel when they work with you? So asking yourself, what kind of energy do people feel when they work with me? How do I respond when I'm challenged or when I'm uncomfortable? Now, when you answer this question, I want you to pick a few scenarios of the most challenging and most uncomfortable times that you've experienced. And I want you to lay the scenario out. So start with what was like as if you were explaining it to someone. So, what was the scenario? What happened? Why was it challenging? And then the last piece would be, how did I respond during that challenge? Was I flustered? Did I lash out? Did I quit? Did I extend my mind, body, self so flat that I almost got sick? What was it that I did when I responded to a challenge or an uncomfortable situation? How did I respond? And then what do I tend to avoid because it feels hard or messy? Where do the fight and flight, where do I flight? When do I flight? Like, when do I actually flee from a situation? What do I want to avoid when things are hard or messy? I'll give you an example for this one. I was coaching a leader, and when we touched some very hard topics about some of the leaders that were in their organization, one particular one that was potentially in the wrong role, when I asked them what their approach and action was, I could see their pattern of avoidance in confrontation. So that could be an area that maybe resonates with you. So, what do I do to avoid is the conversations, the uncomfortable conversations. I avoid conflict. I avoid, having to make a decision. I avoid, having to extend myself to maybe have additional calls with this person or make an action possible. I avoid it at all costs because it makes me feel uncomfortable. So understanding that piece as well. So these three questions will help provide some words around yourself in the place of triggers, in a place of uncomfortableness, because we can all show up when it's all fine and dandy, and when we have our rose glasses on, and when things are great at work. It's really leadership kind of kicks up a notch and sets your butt on fire when things are messy, when things are hard, when conflict arises, when someone quits and leaves you with the project, when you're not meeting your numbers, or when a compliance issue comes up and your boss, has a field day. And so this is kind of the leadership that folks are actually going to remember, is when you are in these hard times, and how do you show up? How do you make people feel? How do you confront these challenges? Do you confront them? If you're uncomfortable, how do you deal with that? Maybe there's an aftermath, right? You show up certain way, we mask at work, and then what does it look like when you're not at work as well? I want you to reflect on that as well. How are you masking? And then what's happening behind the scenes? Feeling burnout, feeling frustrated, overeating, slumping, being in your own cave, whatever that looks like. That also is important, because understanding how you react and your triggers and your emotions, and being able to name your emotions, getting to know yourself, will help you identify when the time comes how to better act, how to better respond, and training yourself, coaching yourself into a better response during the messy and hard situations. That's really the point here. When folks are asking, like, what's the point of getting to know yourself and understanding how you come through in front of your staff and in challenging times? It's important because you're going to leave a mark. And it's important because you need to undo some of these triggers. We all do. We all come with triggers and personal things and biases and we all come with communication styles or lack thereof. And some of us come with more courage than others and confidence than others. And so knowing this will help you coach yourself during those situations. So getting to know yourself, of course. And again, this is not for you to put a judgment or blame or shame on yourself. So be kind to yourself. It's really about leadership maturity. This is how you grow into a good leadership persona, right? A good leader is knowing and understanding and maturing. It's like right now you are, you know, a Jedi in training. What is the Padawan? So you're in training when you're an early leader. And knowing and understanding yourself is maturing yourself, identifying yourself consciously, and not living in the unconscious and unknown space. You need to know it because then you're going to affect those around you and the projects around you. And it's going to stunt your ability to really evolve into the amazing leader that you are inside. I promise you, you're in there. And maybe you already feel it. Maybe that's why you took the role, but it will be less painful when you get to know yourself and understand your triggers and begin to decipher what best approaches you can tag to those triggers to undo them. And we're going to have lots of different series to talk and evolve about self-awareness. This one's just an intro video about emerging leaders to touch on one of the three pillars, which is self-awareness. So if you've ever worked, of course, let's jump into a boss scenario, who has micromanaged everything, who couldn't delegate, who didn't want to have the difficult conversations, or who shut down and dismissed you under emotional distress or stress. That's not a bad intent. The bosses that, if we reflect back and think about the shitty bosses we potentially had in our careers, know that they probably weren't self-aware of what was going on about their triggers. They probably show up like this in life overall, not just at work. I strongly believe that we show up the way we show up in our personal life and our professional. We have similar triggers, if not the same. And so know that when there is a boss that's either micromanaging, that usually comes from a place of fear, when someone is unable to delegate, also a place of fear. When someone shuts down emotionally and doesn't want to have the uncomfortable conversations or doesn't have the courage to have the confrontation with that crappy employee who doesn't want to do their work or that really bad toxic individual who they don't want to call out, that's actually managing in fear. And if you're not aware of your own fears, fear of failure, fear of being disliked, fear of losing control, you're going to lead from a place of a very low level of leadership, which is not inspirational. It's not a place of empowerment, and it's not a place where you're going to make a really positive impact in your own career. You'll lead from them without realizing that you're actually doing it if you're not going to be asking yourself those three tough questions, right? Which is, what kind of energy do people feel when they work with me? Interview some people that you trust to ask that question to so you can get some perspective. How do I respond when I'm challenged or uncomfortable? How do I tend to avoid because it feels harsh or messy? Again, those three questions. What we want to do in this first focus area of self-awareness. Side caveat, this is a journey, not a destination. All of this is, especially self-awareness, is again eliminating fear from your basis of leadership. Okay? Releasing control, allowing others to lead as well around you. Not fearing failure, because that's how we learn. Those are opportunities. So we are going to be reframing during self-awareness. So once you become aware and once you reflect on these answers, I hope that you can take it a step further and even try to put examples of other shitty leaders that you've been around, that you've seen these type of triggers in, and how they've led in fear or with fear as their basis without knowing, unintentionally most often. And it will help you kind of maybe even inspire you, hopefully, to lead with a lighter sense. All right, so now a very empowerment practice, right, that we just talked about is the reactiveness, understanding your triggers. And this again will be built over time. And it will help build your credibility as a leader when you identify it, because others will see it around you. They will see how you're reacting. They will see how you are coming off. They're going to feel how you make them feel. And then people are going to start trusting you. All right. Now, final thought on awareness, right? It's not about this one-time discovery. Like I said, this is a journey, not a destination. Think about it as levels in a game, right? That's what we're doing constantly. It's a lifelong practice. And if you're disenchanted ever, knock on wood, with leadership or managing folks, I guess that's what they call people leaders, right? Not necessarily managing folks, but people leaders. You still need to embody these practices because you're eventually still leading projects, you're leading your family, you're leading your communities, you're leading hopefully in other areas in your life where you're going to be called to lead. And so it's a lifelong practice. It's checking in with yourself, especially when things are going well. And it's asking for feedback for yourself, right? And being honest with yourself. Confident leaders aren't the ones who know it all, right? They're the ones who know themselves enough to stay grounded and to be able to discern those reactions and those triggers and those areas that they need to potentially grow in. So start there. And if anything, you want to put a pause on this video and say, this is where I'm going to start. That's wonderful. We're still going to go through the other two in case, you definitely want to take on a little bit more. But again, these are the basic areas to help evolve you as that leader that you dream of evolving into. All right, so that's where leadership begins, right? Is self-awareness. Now, communication, how to build clarity, connection, and trust within your team, even when you're new to the role. Clarity and connection are important, right? It's communication is the heartbeat of leadership. It is the center of leadership. It sits right here. Even though it does come through your throat, of course, through your voice and your mind, but really communication really does need to sit in the heart because it needs to be clear, it needs to be consistent, compassionate. And that's why I talk about it being the heartbeat, because communication needs to have a level of compassion to it. Nothing else you do will land the way that you intend without clearly depicting whatever it is that you want to communicate, consistently staying with what you're communicating, how you're communicating, and then always coming in with compassion, communicating and leading with compassion. So you can have the best vision, you can have the best plan, right? Especially if you're like this intellect tactical individual and you've laid out a wonderful plan. But if you can't communicate it and people don't understand it and they don't know what to expect because you haven't been able to communicate it clearly, or maybe you think you communicated clearly, but your team's very confused, then they can't follow you and they can't embrace it. And so for emerging leaders, that's where most of the breakdown actually happens is in communication. So new leaders often assume that if they said it once, people will hear it or have heard it, they've understood it, and they've remembered it. Let's go back into science because in reality, people actually interpret communication through their own experience, their own fears, their own assumptions. So, for example, if you're talking with a persona who you've never worked with, you've inherited this team, let's say, let's build a scenario, and you have this persona who you don't know about, but this persona has a lot of fear in messing up. They've had crappy bosses in the past. They've been hand slapped, not physically, but you know what I mean, called out on. They don't feel psychologically safe in their work environment. And here comes a new leader, and all they've had was pretty crappy experiences with really bad leaders who've called them out, who've embarrassed them, who, when they mess up, they just eat at themselves. They're very, maybe just consumed by their errors. And so they have a lot of fear. And so if you're communicating, hey, we're going to meet every week, and to you that communication is coming from a place, let's say, of love and compassion, of I want to get to know you, and but you haven't said it. You haven't said it. You've only said we're going to be meeting once a week, all of us individually, one-on-ones. That person might actually ingest that information as, oh no, I'm going to be hearing about my mistakes every single week. So you see, the communication there is important. If you only said as a leader that you're going to be meeting with your staff every single week, once a week, and have a one-on-one, which one, bravo to you, great best practice. But if you haven't communicated clearly your intention of why, if you haven't communicated clearly, the items maybe that you'll be talking on during the one-on-ones, and you're potentially leaving a lot of assumption on the table. And so that one persona that has so much fear in their role, in their job, and messing up and losing their job because maybe they've been laid off many times or let go, and they just, have this trauma. And that's what it is. It's workplace trauma, which a lot of us do have to some degree. Your communication is probably starting off in the wrong foot for that relationship with that individual. So, just an example, right, to kind of give a little perspective of why communication needs to be clear, it needs to be consistent, and it needs to come with compassion. It needs to be armed with compassion, not leaving any assumptions. And you can't control it all, right? Some people will make their own assumptions regardless, but trying your best, what we call in government contracting industry, red teaming your own, kind of communication overall that you're giving, red teaming, ensuring that you're looking at it from different angles so that you are as clear as possible. And that your intention is of course always going to be from a place of compassion, but you're showing that. So it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it as well, and how often you reinforce things, especially if it's a new memo that came out or a new approach, a new process, a new, deliverable of some sort, a new way if in the culture of your team, you need to communicate it consistently. So pretty often, don't assume that they've heard it the first time. They might need to hear it multiple times. because we can only digest so far, so much. And that's where the science piece comes. Humans can only digest so much. Sometimes it's even 30 to 40% of when someone's at, even in this video, if you're not taking notes and if you're not going back to this video a number of times to pick up on all the nuances that maybe you didn't pick up, you're leaving a lot on the table. So a lot of times humans will digest 30, 40, maybe 50% of what we're hearing. So you've got to keep that under consideration when you're communicating. There are different forms of communication, not just, verbal. There's, of course, email. There are processes and SOPs that maybe you're communicating through as well to reinforce the original communication. There are different ways of communicating, and so you need to be cognizant that in each of those ways, you need to have that clarity and that concisiveness so that it's easy for anyone of any level, any background, any walk of life would be able to pick up and understand and find the clarity in that message. All right, so start with using, just a leadership tip here. Start with using, this phrase often. Let's make sure we're aligned on what success looks like. So that one sentence can also help prevent maybe 90% of team misunderstanding. So if you're in a team meeting of some sort, you're communicating, we do need to understand what others or how others are absorbing what we're saying. So the one-on-ones are a really great approach to really ask questions. Again, being a better listener, not always using this. It's always using this, right? Opening up your ears to be receptive and really understanding if you are asking the question of, what does what I said look like to you? How are you interpreting it? Just to get a really good understanding from your team or in your one-on-ones that the communication that you are delivering is landing in the way that you've expected and hoped for it to land. Okay. All right. So that's on the communication front. And we talked about, connection over perfection, as far as not needing to be perfect, right, in the way that we lead. So people don't need to be in that place of perfection. Know that. I want you to relieve yourself from that thought and that limiting belief. Um, that I want you to be present. So some leaders actually avoid really hard conversations and still staying with the topic of communication because they don't want to say the wrong thing. And some people might be leading again with fear. So not wanting to say too much maybe, and maybe putting it all in email. I do better in email, Monica, than verbal. But I still want, folks to have the conversations, especially the hard ones, especially when you're delivering new things that could potentially rub the team the wrong way, or you're maybe fearful that it's going to turn some people off, or a decision that was made by management, upper management, has trickled down to you as middle management. It's one of the toughest positions to be in, to have to deliver that message as well to your team, right? So new leaders have a hard time sometimes having these hard type conversations and sometimes overcompensate, and they talk at their team, thinking more about how they're going to be showing up as rather than how the team is going to interpret and take it in. And so be cognizant of that. Make sure that you're making a connection with your team, that you're showing curiosity in your communication as well. So asking questions like, does that make sense as far as this, and that, whatever it was that you were communicating, let's say an updated process. Did that process make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Can we work through this together? Do we need an example? Here's an example. Kind of listen to your team if they're like, yeah, actually, can you provide us an example? Or no, that really doesn't make sense. Or you have someone on the team that is maybe challenging it, take it with stride and accept the curiosity, even if it feels like maybe there's a challenge there. Be open to asking, how they're feeling about it, what obstacles they may potentially be seeing, giving the new communication or whatever it is that you're delivering to the team as far as overall communication. What do you need from me, or what can I do better than in that instant, or what are your suggestions, right? So those type of questions to connect with the team, not just delivering what you need to deliver in the communication, that's probably being trickled down from upper management, or that's something that you identified and came up with and want to deliver to the team, but also kind of test the waters through that communication, right? Ask those questions. You want to be curious about how your team is taking it in. Again, make that connection. Connection should be at the forefront of your communication as well, right? Building that. And back to, the stronger clarity in the communication, having it be the two-way street. You should be inviting feedback. Don't be afraid to invite feedback. Invite feedback when you're communicating something that's being trickled down. Invite feedback on, even how you're showing up as. But it's important that great leaders don't give feedback, they invite it. Okay, ask for it. And there might be better scenarios and better forums in your team's meetings where it will be more welcomed. And so kind of choose wisely on when to do that, whether that's more intimate during the one-on-one, or you've just delivered, like I said, a new process or a new approach, and you want to hear back from the team on what folks think. And also know that it's, there's some embodiment in this two-way street of flexibility as well, especially on your end. You can be very transparent and forward with them and say, I'm still learning in this role too. I'd love to hear your feedback on how I can support you better. It doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you credible. It makes you receptive. And when we are receptive leaders, leaders that welcome feedback, leaders that want to hear opinions, that want to understand their team and their employees, they build trust and credibility in their relationship with their people. And if anyone in the room was on the fence with their new leader, these instances of authenticity, of letting them know, hey, I'm really new in my role and I'd love to hear from you, or I'd love to hear everyone's perspective in our one-on-ones this week. So please take a moment to jot down some thoughts. And when you come, and meet during our one-on-one, I'd love to hear your perspective. It really builds confidence in the relationship, and it actually gives them also empowerment, because that's how you can also gift empowerment in your teams, so that if they do have a great idea, or if they do have a little tweak or a suggestion of some sort, especially those very engaged employees, you want to keep them engaged. You want to keep them feeling empowered, but do it authentically, of course, right? Do it from a place of love and a place of compassion. And when they do come, be receptive. Don't shoot anything down. Say, yeah, let me think through that. Even if it sounds a little wacky and maybe a little unrealistic, and in your mind you're just like, yeah, I don't think that upper management's going to buy that. You can say, let me chew on that a little bit. Let me think through that, or let me explore on that subject. Or tell me more. What do you mean by that? How would you see it rolled out? That sort of questions, right? Being inquisitive about it. Again, that communication is going to be paramount, especially your first weeks in the role, is being receptive. Be receptive always, but those are the most critical times. Find those opportunities to ask and to be open to that type of back and forth communication with those that you're working around and your counterparts, the stakeholders, right? The ones that are horizontal to you as well, because I'm sure you're meeting with a lot of leaders in your same horizontal, so your counterparts, stakeholders, but also upper management as they get to know you as a leader. Hopefully that's happening. Those are great best practices to do. Or if not, you take advantage of reaching out as well, but try to have that one-on-one dialogue and that open communication with the team and your counterparts. So just be clear, right, with what you're expecting, especially when you're delivering things. Be honest about change. Be honest about yourself and where you're coming from. People will forgive mistakes, but what they won't forget is how you made them feel. So remember that it's what you left in that room of feeling in that individual when you showed up or you didn't show up, or maybe you talked at them instead of with them, Right. And so communication skills is something that we also need to do as a long life learning initiative is to better our communication. And if you have any opportunities that you can record your communication, or if you have meetings, and you end up recording them and saving them for maybe members that couldn't make it, go back and listen to it yourself so that you understand also how it is that you're coming off as and get to know how you're communicating through your own ear. Okay. All right. So let's move into the last piece of the three foundational areas, bite-sized pieces that I want you to take little by little in all three of these as you evolve as a leader. Or maybe you can just take one and focus on one for now, because this is a lot, right? This is, again, a journey, not a destination. So the last piece and component that I want to talk about is accountability. How to create structure, how to follow through without becoming a micromanager. Accountability is another area that I see some not very good leaders not be able to tackle well. So, accountability might be one of those things that are maybe most misunderstood in leadership, or words that are actually not very well defined in leadership. Most people hear it and they think discipline, they think correction, they think control. But no, no, no. Accountability isn't about punishment. Accountability, it's about partnership. Again, you're in the people business no matter what industry you're in. You're a leader and you're in the people business. So it's a structure that allows your team to feel clear, capable, and trusted. So when you set a clear expectation, you follow through on the team or on yourself. You remove anxiety. You build consistency, and you're going to create a sense of stability. That's why accountability is so important. Employees need to feel psychologically safe, but also feel stability in their team and in their leader. That stability will allow people to thrive in a great environment. So, accountability is paramount. So, one, set clear expectations early. Unspoken expectations are the fastest path to resentment on both sides, right? When someone joins your team or takes on a project, don't assume that they know what success looks like. You've got to define it together. It's not just your job to define success. It's done, again, two-way between you and the team, or you and that individual. So, what does a great outcome look like to you? Is a great question to ask when you're building the expectation of whatever task is there. You might think that the expectation is clear and understandable by the folks, but let me tell you how often folks have expectations of all sorts, of all levels, some that have really surprised me. So ask, what does a great outcome look like to you? Here's how I'm defining success. Do you see it in the same way? So you can also provide your outlook of what success might look like in that instant, in that project, in that role, in that task. And then ask them, is that how you see it, or do you have a different perspective, or do you want to add on to that? So these small alignments up front, it really saves weeks of frustration later on. Once you've set the expectation, you've agreed upon the expectation together, right? Make sure that you document it, especially after, like, there's been some really, really awesome one-on-ones with some people when I was a people leader. And sometimes there's some employees aren't very engaged, and so you have a little bit more of an uncomfortable one-on-one. But nonetheless, I like to document. So I send a quick email right afterwards and give like three top bullets. But especially if there was like an expectation that we set together, or there was something that bothered the employee and we reset an expectation together, or came up with the tasking with an expectation, I followed it up with a quick email. So I did a very quick email, a few bullets saying if there's anything else you want to add to that, but I'm looking forward to our next one-on-one. So it's clear, not just verbally, like I said, people can only digest so much when they're listening, right? When they're absorbing, because so much is coming at them. But when they read it, sometimes there's a different perspective, or there's like, oh, I missed that. Huh. I didn't really catch on that. Or, oh, that's great, right? So there's sometimes things that come up when you document it. And there's things that sometimes we miss as leaders. And so ask them, is there anything else I missed? Anything else you'd love to add based on the decision we made together today? So it's a great way to kind of close that up. Um, and then say, here's what we agreed upon as far as timeline. Again, anything else that you'd love to add on, please feel free. Or anything I missed, being authentic, making sure that you're coming through in a way that you're receptive to feedback, receptive to receiving. That's important as a leader. Okay. Another piece, build a culture of ownership, not obedience. Again, still part of the whole accountability piece, right? Micromanagement happens when leaders confuse accountability with control. I'll say it again. Micromanagement happens when leaders confuse accountability with control. Your job isn't to hover, it's to equip, setting them up for success. You're there to remove barriers, clarify priorities, help rack and stack those priorities or shift them, create a space where people feel great performing in the role that they're in. You are an empowerment leader. That's what we're looking for in leadership. Instead of asking, did you do this? Right? When you're in the accountability realm, you don't want to micromanage again, right? Try asking. So instead of asking, right, did you do this? Or where are you with this? It's very micromanaging terminology. Instead of doing that, ask, what do you need from me to move this forward? That question shifts the dynamic from inspection to actually collaboration because we're working through this together. We're a team. I'm not throwing the task over the fence and letting you tackle it and then coming back and saying, hey, where you at? No, no, no. We're working on this together. You're leading it. You're leading the task. You're assigned the task. You have the priority set. And I'm just doing a follow through. I just want to make sure that I've got my eyeball on how things are shifting and moving. And what can I do as a leader to help you continue being successful in that task? So when people feel ownership, because that's what you're doing, you're giving them that ownership and you're saying, where can I step in? They take the initiative. You want them to feel that ownership. You don't want them to feel like it's a task that they just have to check the box. You want them to feel that they have owned that task and that they control it and that you're there to support them as that servant leader. When they feel controlled, they hide, they'll delay, they'll resist you. So if you want accountability, you have to lead with trust first and then follow up second. Next item when it comes to accountability is going to be the behavior you expect. Accountability starts with you. And this actually should have been first thing on the top of my list, but nonetheless, accountability starts with you. If you expect your team to meet deadlines, you need to meet yours. This is coming from someone who doesn't have consistency and discipline as my top Clifton strengths, okay? I force myself to be consistent and disciplined. It's very hard for me. It doesn't come natural. I still do it. I still meet deadlines. I do great things. But nonetheless, it's an area that some of us struggle with. And you have to be cognizant of your reputation as a leader. If you can't meet your deadlines, if you miss giving something to someone when you said you would do it, and you're not holding yourself accountable, then how are we supposed to hold others accountable, right? With what power can we do that with? Not very much, right? We're going to be losing the power of trust. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying power. It's really the power of trust between you and your team. So if you expect transparency as well, then you need to be open and communicate. You can't be a secret squirrely person here and, you're more loyal to your upper management than your team. You need to have open transparency as much as you can. And if you make a mistake, own it. Take accountability for your mistake. If you miss a deadline, say, I am so sorry. I totally missed that. I had it on my calendar and I just couldn't get to it and I'm really sorry. I didn't even send you an email. Come from a place of taking ownership for your mistake very quickly, as soon as you're able to. Don't wait weeks. And then move on and say, here it is. Or give them a time frame where you can get it to them. That happens. And we all need to have that flexibility and compassion when we're communicating and when we're messing up, because it's going to happen sometimes. Sometimes you're overwhelmed. Be transparent with what's going on and make sure that you're holding yourself accountable first and foremost. When you model accountability, it normalizes accountability. It tells your team we don't aim for perfection, we're going to aim for honesty. And that creates a psychologically safe environment. So instead, use this language. Here's what I learned from this, right? I messed up. Here's what I learned from it. My apologies, and come from a place of authenticity. Set your ego aside. Accountability, when we have to be holding ourselves accountable, we need to learn and practice how to set our ego aside. It doesn't make you a less possible leader in your role. It just means that you're human and that everyone's human and they're human too. And you're always going to come from a place of humanity, right? Of humanizing folks and humanizing yourself. It keeps the focus on growth instead of blame when, let's say, something, did not go the best it could, or someone missed something, or tasking or a project or an initiative. And so it will help, your team understand that we're here to grow, we'll make mistakes. Something happened, okay, let's move forward from it. So it's really about how you recover in those very mucky times as a leader when you're trying to hold your team accountable, hold yourself accountable. And it's going to be less about the actual mistake, and we got to make it more about how we're recovering from it and how we're learning from it. So remember, clarity builds confidence, follow through builds trust, and consistency will build credibility. That's all under the umbrella of accountability. Clarity, trust, consistency. It's what's going to separate you from the people managers, people managing people, and it's going to separate you from those really great leaders, right? The leaders that you want to be in, the true leaders, and that circle that you want to be seen within. So, if you've been thrown into this leadership role without a roadmap, as most of us have been, if you've been blessed with a roadmap, good on you. This maybe will help reinforce that roadmap, hopefully. But know that most often organizations aren't always providing that mentorship and that training to ensure that their leaders have a roadmap. So these three foundational ones, knowing yourself, communicating clearly, following through with integrity, are elements that will help you take that next level up into leadership and will help get you on a great journey to rising into that wonderful leadership persona that lives within you. You don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to ensure that there's perfection in what you do. You just have to keep showing up with awareness, consistency, and you're willing to grow, because that's what really makes a true good leader. So, if you've made it this far, I want to thank you, and say, leadership really isn't something that you arrive at, right? Like we talked about. It's not like, okay, I made it to this level. I'm a great leader now. Now what, right? No, it's not that. It really is evolving and evolving yourself, something that you grow into. And you don't need the fancy title, a certification that shows that you're a good leader, or 10 years of experience in leading teams or leading well. It really is You do need courage, right, to stay self-aware because ego might get in the way, to communicate honestly and to follow through on what you're saying to keep, of course, your value and your integrity intact. Every leader starts somewhere. Most of us start messy, we're unsure, we're overwhelmed, we try to figure it out, how to motivate people, try to keep them, afloat. But that's okay. That's where the real leadership really begins. It begins with really deciphering what that means for you. And so stepping into this new role, and trying to redefine how you lead is really the first step. So take this as your permission slip to lead differently, to lead consciously and with awareness. And of course, like I mentioned before, lead with humanity because your team doesn't need that perfect leader. They need the present one, right? All right. So again, I'm Monica from Mivia Leadership, and where we help leaders grow from inside out. And if this conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe, share it with others, other new leaders in your realm of leaders. Stay connected. Together, we're going to redefine what leadership really looks like, not through fear, not through ego, but through awareness and integrity, and of course, always trying to make an impact, not just for yourself, but for your team and your organization. So, thank you for watching. And remember, you don't have to lead with perfection, you really just have to lead with intention. Okay? Sending you love. Hope you all stay grounded, and hope to see you next time. Bye bye.